In this video, we're going to learn about variables. Variables are the way that a program remembers something. So if I would like my program to keep track of, let's say, the user's name and maybe the year that they were born, so that I can do some math and figure out how old they are later, I would need two variables. I would need one variable to keep track of their name and one variable to keep track of when they were born. A variable is a little bit like a box, so our program would have two boxes. We could put one piece of information in each box. In order to refer to the box, we need a name. I want to be able to put Sophia into one box and then say later, we'll go to that box and get the name back out. When I first started programming, I gave my variables names like Maria and Fred, but that's not very ideal. We don't want to have to figure out, well, I need the name back. Was the name in the Maria box or the Fred box? So let's give our variables much better names, learn from my mistakes, give them a name like name, that's where the name will go, and year born, that's where the year the user was born will go. That makes a lot more sense, right? We also have to tell the computer what kind of information is going to go in our box. So the name box will have to say, well, there's going to be text in here. And the year born box, we're going to have to say, this should hold a number. And in fact, we have to be more specific than that. We have to tell it whether it's going to be a whole number or whether it's going to be a number with decimals. Once we create a box and we tell it what kind of information goes in the box, only that kind of information can go there. So we can't put the name Mike in the year born box, and we can't put the year 1998 in the name box. We could put something like California in the name box. It doesn't know anything about what type of text should go in there, but it knows it should be text. So let's see how this works in our Java program. In order to create the variable, we write the type of information and then the name. We're going to start with the most basic kind of variable, an int, which is short for integer. So this can only hold whole numbers, no decimal numbers. This will create a box called year born that can hold ints, only whole numbers. Now let's see a really simple Java program in action. We'll step through it line by line the way Java actually runs the program. So the first line is int a. That says create a new box, call it a. It can only hold integers. It can only hold whole numbers. The second line, do the same thing but call the box b this time. These are terrible names. We should give them better names, but it's just a really quick example. The third line says set a equal to 5. That says essentially put that number 5 into the box called a. The fourth line is a little bit more complicated. It's setting the value of b. It's going to put a number into b, but it's got to do a calculation to figure out what number that should be. So a plus 2, it's got to get the value from a, do the math, 5 plus 2 is 7, and then put that 7 into the b box. And then the last line says, well, now a should be 3, and it's going to take that 3 and put it in the a box. Notice that b's value did not change. B doesn't remember I'm a plus 2. It remembers I'm 7. So the fact that a changed does not impact b at all. We have programs like that so frequently where we create a variable like int a and then assign it a value, a equals 5, a line or two later, so frequently that Java gives us a little shorthand for doing that. Instead of having two separate lines, one that creates the box and the next one that puts the value into the box, we can make that a little shorter. We can put it all in one line, int a equals 5, or int b equals a plus 2. That line creates the box and puts 5 in it. There are actually a huge number of types of variables that you can use in Java, and we'll be able to even create our own as the semester goes on. But the three most basic ones are the ones we'll start with. An int, which holds integers or whole numbers, that's what we've seen up to this point. A double, which holds decimal numbers. And a string, which can hold text. A string can hold really any amount of text. It can hold something short like Abdullah, or it could hold the empty string, which is just two quotes one after another, no text inside. Or it could hold something huge, like the entire dictionary or the entire works of Shakespeare. It can be any size we'd like it to be. The other two are fixed in their size. So an integer can only hold numbers between roughly -2 billion and +2 billion. We won't run into that much in the course, but it has sometimes had real-world consequences, so it's something to be at least aware of. A double has a much bigger range. It can hold tiny, tiny numbers, and it can also hold huge numbers, like 1 followed by 300 zeros. But it does have some limitations, and we'll see that a little bit as the course goes on. Int is short for integer, and string is a standard word for text in computer science. But I really wish I could rename double for you. Double, I'll just encourage you to remember either that double and decimal both start with D's, and so for a decimal number, we use the double type of variable. Or you can remember the real reason it's called a double, which is that we initially had a variable, and it's still in use, called a float, that held decimal numbers. And for a lot of purposes, it didn't hold a big enough range of numbers, so they made it twice as big, or they doubled the size. So that's where the name double comes from. A couple of last notes about this screen. The most important is the name of the variables. You'll notice that each of the variable names is short. We don't want huge variable names like year the user was born. It's short, but it's clear and it explains what's going on in that variable. When I look at year born, I know that's going to hold a year, and that that's going to be the year that someone was born. If I'm holding multiple users' information in here, I might need to make that a little bit longer. But if we're only just talking about one user, clearly that's the year they were born. We want names to be as clear as possible. Computer science is extremely collaborative. You'll be working in large groups in the real world. And it's also something where you might set a program aside for a year or two and then need to do some work on it, need to add some new functionality that's required. And so you'll be working on other people's programs. You'll be working on programs you haven't looked at in a couple of years. And so something like y as a variable name isn't going to tell you much about what that variable is doing. Instead, year born communicates that very clearly. Also with naming variables, you'll notice that each variable is entirely letters. There's no spaces. We're not allowed to have spaces. We can have some other characters, but we're generally just going to stick to letters. And it's mostly lowercase letters. Every variable should start with a lowercase letter. And only if there are multiple words should there be a capital letter. You'll notice year born, the B is capitalized to make it really easy for us to read that born is a separate word. GPA, even though that's abbreviated and it would normally be capitalized, we're going to keep all three letters in lowercase. Name, again, is entirely in lowercase because it's just one word. This is called camel case because if you look at year born, you can see the little hump. That hump helps you see where the next word starts if there's more than one word. And that just makes it really easy to read, even if we need multiple words in a variable name, very easy to see where those words are.